Hello, and welcome to another installment of the Traxo Office Hours series. Today, we'll be covering an overview of NDC and its impact on the corporate travel industry. New distribution capability, or NDC, has been a topic of conversation in our industry for over a decade. Yet, recent studies show about 10% of travel agent sales are coming from NDC interfaces. Until recently, 95% of NDC indirect sales are for leisure travel. That's 1 in every 200 bookings being made with NDC technology for business travel. However, American Airlines' recent announcement to GDSs and TMCs to be ready for NDC or else has applied pressure to our industry. And corporate travel professionals are left with many questions, and it's our hope to answer many of those questions here today. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. We are recording today's webinar for your review and to share with colleagues as you see fit. And we'll be making the recording available via the Traxo Resource Center, as well as on our YouTube channel. Also, the Q&A feature is open now, and we will be monitoring throughout the webinar. So as questions arise, please feel free to submit them through the webinar. So without further ado, let's introduce today's guests. Suzanne Boyan is the Global Travel Manager for ZS Associates. She joined ZS Associates in 2012 with 6 years experience in the hospitality industry. She earned a bachelor's degree in hospitality, followed by a GTP travel certification. Her deep understanding of how airline and hotel suppliers operate within their respective providers' spaces showcases the ideal background and combination of skill and knowledge for her role. In August of 2019, Suzanne was named Business Travel News Travel Manager of the Year. Her accomplishments were recognized again 3 months later as one of BTN's 25 most influential people in travel. A full-length article also chronicled the design of her and management of her program, describing it as state-of-the-art and an industry disruptor. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining us today. And Chuck Fisher, VP of Distribution and Financial Services for Airlines Reporting Corporation. Chuck leads a team focused on the continuous growth and evolution of ARC's settlement, payments, and airline retailing solutions portfolio. He also sits on the board of directors at New Travel. Chuck has been at ARC for more than 30 years, starting his career as an area bank representative in Louisville, Kentucky. And prior to ARC, Chuck was a contract specialist with the U.S. Department of the Navy. Welcome, Chuck. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Corey Garner is the Chief Executive Officer at Garner. Corey is a leading travel technology innovator and 20-year veteran of American Airlines, where he led American strategies for distribution, travel agency incentives, and programs for corporate customers of all sizes. He has been instrumental in driving global adoption of new technologies. Corey was a pioneer in the airline distribution technology, which was later codified by the International Air Transport Association as its new distribution capability, or NDC standard. In part, because of his strategic work, consumers can more easily compare airline products, and airlines have access to a new significant competitor to global distribution systems. Thank you so much for joining us today, Corey. All right, so let's get started and jump right in. Corey, I'm going to start with you. So there are some on this webinar here today that are probably a little confused by this whole NDC concept. And we know what the abbreviation means, but can you give us a little bit of an understanding of what it is?
Yeah, sure. To put it briefly in a word, it's a pipe. It's a pipe that conveys all of the old content that airlines have. So the old content being fares for travel between point A and point B, together with the new content. And the new content is ancillaries, bundles, and convey that via this new pipe to travel agency systems. And those travel agency systems might be booking tools, GDSs, aggregators. The way I try to explain this is to give everybody a comparison to the way media is distributed. So think about television shows. It used to be you could watch Seinfeld on your cable box, and it was delivered to you via this old black cable. But this new innovation called fiber optic cable came around 15, 20 years ago, and they started installing that in your neighborhood. And with this new fiber optic cable, you could get all the same old content, all the old Seinfeld episodes, and then you could get new content like Ted Lasso. And for some people, the opportunity to get the new content, the Ted Lasso content, was enough. And they jumped and upgraded their systems and got new TVs, and they had both Seinfeld and Ted Lasso. For other people, and my parents were in this category, they were quite satisfied to stay with just Seinfeld. Thank you very much. And because they could stay with just Seinfeld, they stayed on that old black cable for a very long period of time. And it wasn't until someone came around and said, hey, you know what? You're actually not going to get all the old Seinfeld episodes anymore. You're going to have to move to the new pipe to get it, that they did anything at all. And so here we are again, just in a different context, experiencing the same situation with airline fares, ancillaries, bundles, and the like.
And you know what's interesting is on the prep call, you brought up a good point. So it's been 10 years at least, a little longer, that we've been talking about NDC and business travel. What's the problem? Why has there been a bottleneck? Why has it taken this long?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would call it a bottleneck. And in fact, there are two different distribution environments in the world when it comes to airline indirect distribution or distribution through travel agencies. And they've behaved very differently over the last 10 years. So those two segments of distribution are leisure and corporate. So leisure, the top names in leisure are online travel agencies like Expedia. The top names in corporate are the big TMCs, GBT, CWT, BCD, everything with 3 letters. And these two segments of the market behave very differently. And it all boils down to content. So I just talked about how my parents didn't move off the old cable until Seinfeld wasn't available anymore. Well, that moment came for online travel agencies about 10 years ago. So about 10 years ago, it was more common that airlines were putting pressure on online travel agencies to switch to the new pipe because they simply wouldn't have all of the content, and in some cases wouldn't have any content from that airline unless they used the new pipe. So 10 years ago, OTAs happily, well, maybe not happily, went down the path of connecting to the new pipe and started working through all of the issues that we're now hearing about today. Servicing, how do you deal with this scenario? How do you deal with that scenario? What call center are my users going to call into, and how are we going to handle those requests? Those are things that were all solved 10 years ago, depending upon where you are in the market. In the corporate market, it's been very different over the last 10 years because before the pandemic, an airline, particularly in the US, had to be very conservative about how much risk they took in the corporate segment. Corporate yields were much higher than leisure yields at the time. The amount of corporate travel occurring was very significant. And so an airline had to think twice before they started to do something as rash as pulling content out of the old pipe. But the pandemic came. And when the pandemic came, things started to change. The mix of corporate volume went down. The relative yields between corporate and leisure compressed. And all of that adds up to a situation where an airline might view that volume to be more replaceable than it used to be. And if it's more replaceable than it used to be, then it's more prone to be the subject of some risk that an airline's willing to take with its strategy. So now you have American coming along saying that they're going to take a significant amount of content out of the old pipe. And lo and behold, everybody in the industry has snapped to it. The work is now being done. And it all came down to big chunks of content being taken out.
It's interesting. So, there are some that would be of the thought process that, hey, we've been booking travel over this past decade or so, and we've been doing it just fine. Like the thought process of, if it ain't broke, why are we trying to fix it? Right. So, Chuck, I'm going to ask you, why does all this matter? What's the significance of this?
Yeah, I think, well, as Corey said, right, it all comes down to content, right? And so, I'll try to answer the question from both a GDS and maybe provide some views from an agency perspective. I'll let Suze kind of comment on, what it means to the buyer. But at the end of the day, it's about access to content that's not otherwise available through traditional distribution systems. A lot of that content is new, whether in the form of bundles, and more importantly, it's content that can be personalized to meet the needs of the traveler, right? So, based upon an airline's deal with a particular corporation, they have the ability through NDC to be able to customize or tailor offers to meet not only the corporate needs, but more importantly, the individual traveler needs as well. So content, certainly important, content access for GDSs and the TMCs. Often hear a lot of conversation around the GDSs and, what's the future of the GDSs? And I think GDSs are here. They're here to stay. They're not going to go anywhere. They're a critical piece of the infrastructure in this industry, and they're used for, far more things than just booking air. But, I think this is a great opportunity for the GDSs at the same time, right? They've demonstrated resiliency throughout the years as our industry has changed, and we moved from paper tickets to electronic tickets, and now, an NDC and so on. And they've always found a way to adapt and add value back to their customers. So I think, leading in terms of innovation and helping, their customers, TMCs, navigate through this new distribution process is going to be, it's a tremendous opportunity for them.
Excellent. And so you mentioned the GDS, the benefits of the TMC and the online booking tool for NDC. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Again, it comes back to being able to access content that is relevant to their customers, being able to help their customers then make more informed choices, more educated choices. A lot of this content now is graphical, if you will. So you hear the words rich content, but it translates into pictures, more descriptive information than traditionally has been available in the old green screen worlds, right? So it really allows agencies and even travelers, the traveler, to kind of visualize and see and get a better feel for what that experience is going to be, with the airline, with whatever the product is that they're choosing to purchase.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chuck. So, Suze, I'm going to turn to you. I know that a vast majority of our audience are travel managers just like you, and they'd love to hear from their peer. So talk to me a little bit about ZS. What are your preparations for this move from American? This is the week, this is the go live, right? So what did you do about this when you heard it was coming? And, what have you done since within your organization?
Yeah, I think my first response very, very candidly was to stick my head in the sand and not do anything in hopes like there's no way they can roll this out in 5 months. There's just no way. And then, as I started talking to Corey and talking to my other industry friends, Bill Kramer and folks over at United, it started to become very clear that this is not going to go away. So immediately, I pushed very hard on our TMC Frosh to enable NDC content on United, because I said, if we are going to head down this path, let's do it with an airline who is friendlier to ZS. And, we have a really great partnership with United. And so if, things hit the fan, we're going to be able to call them up and really get a good service and understand and try and fix the problems before they happen with American. And we haven't enabled content on American, NDC content on American yet. We are planning on doing that shortly, sometime in April. I've also pushed Frosh to get that connected. Apparently everyone is pushing their TMC to do that. So there's a little bit of a hang up over at American to actually get the, the credentials to do that. So, I guess my advice to any travel manager would be whichever airline you have the best relationship with, try to get that set up first. So that way you can kind of see what it's going to look like, feel it, and know that you have that support, and then go and enable the other ones next.
That's a good response. Yeah. So follow-up question. A lot of the travel managers are wondering, is this recent move going to drive travel bookings to airlines directly? I think the answer is likely. So what are your thoughts around that? And if so, how will you handle that?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And we're already seeing it at CS this week. One of my colleagues, Stevie, who might be on the line, did a quick search trying to figure out why someone booked Alaska over American, and there was a $500 price difference. Same exact routing. And yeah, people, if they really want to book American, are just going to go directly on the website and book it. Am I worried about that? No, because we have Traxo. Thank you. So if nothing else, I get the data and I get covered for duty of care. Is it my preferred method for our people to go and book that content? No, because if they book direct, I really can't help them. If something happens and they don't have status, like a big snowstorm, or there were big thunderstorms that rolled through the Midwest recently, canceled a whole bunch of flights, I can't take over that booking and help them. But I get it. I mean, they end up saving $500. That's a big deal. That's not small change when you amplify that over the course of a whole business. And I think you're right. When I was talking to other travel managers, there was a lot of talk about, well, what if we pull our agreement and really push people to book on other airlines? I think it's nice in theory, but for example, my CEO is American loyal, and I am not about to tell him he cannot book on American. So I think a lot of us have that kind of relationship with the airlines where we really want to view it as a partnership, and it wouldn't be being a good partner to pull that content from our program. What's being a good partner is, I think, heading down this path and just saying, look, you didn't do this well, American, which I've said to my rep, who is no longer my rep, but that's a story for a different day. And yeah, just say, look, I don't like the way this was handled, but we're going to head down this path and try it.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Suze. So let me just ask the panel openly. April 3rd was the D-Day, right? That was the date that American set. How's it going so far? What do you guys think?
I would say about as expected. Anytime you have a change of this magnitude from a technology perspective, from the perspective of content moving from this pipe to the other pipe, you're going to uncover all of the use cases that weren't fully tested or weren't fully thought through, or maybe they were thought through and you just decided that you weren't going to handle that in the initial going. But what we're finding out now is all of the use cases that need to be solved. Those are all going on people's lists at the TMC, at the OBT, at the GDS, at the airline to go fix at this point. And it's a process that will just continually work itself out over a very long period of time. These things are not knife edge cutovers. This is not downloading an app and you're done. It's integration work that goes across multiple steps in the chain, and every step in the chain has to be integrated, or none of them are integrated. And so it'll just take some time to work through over a very long period of time.
It's interesting, Corey, in our prep, you mentioned something about how this line in the sand is not necessarily a new concept. It's just been hitting the media. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Remind me. We're
talking about United had already made a move like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's widely publicized. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that here.
That's a good point. United came out at end of last year, early this year, and said that they have actually been actively pricing many of their fares continuously on their own website at united.com. And so the short story of what a continuous price is that it's a fare that's calculated on the fly by the airline when a traveler asks for a price quote between an origin and a destination pair. And those prices that are calculated on the fly, by definition, can only come from the airline's own shopping system. And so the way you get access to an airline's own shopping system is either through their own website, or if you're shopping in an indirect channel that is powered by that airline's NDC connection, that also gives you access to the airline's shopping system. And so what United said was the second half of last year, they had actually 40% of the domestic tickets they sold on united.com were continuously priced, 40%. And so this is a case of an airline that's adding new price points. So they didn't take any legacy price points out of the old channel. They added new price points, and those new price points added up to 40%. And I just think it's kind of poetic that they added 40% of content that's not in the old channel. And now we have American taking away 40% of content that used to be in the old channel. So depending upon whether you're a glass half full person or a glass half empty person, you've got two of the three big legacy players in the US now not distributing 40% of the content through legacy channels.
Very interesting.
Justin, I wanted to jump in. It has been around a while. NDC isn't new. In fact, at ARC, we've been processing NDC transactions, started with American back in 2006. Admittedly, volumes have been, very low, and it's been a ramp up. But you mentioned 10% of the transactions are now going through an NDC, and that's exactly what we're seeing currently through our system. We've got a program called ARC Direct Connect, and that's where we work with airlines who are implementing NDC or direct connections in the marketplace with agencies, and we're able to work with those airlines to consume the transactional data, feed it through our settlement system, integrate it into all of our reporting, so that everything flows through just like the EDIFACT transactions would, and then ultimately feed up into agencies' back office systems. So it's 10% of our volume now is coming through the NDC channel, and we're continue to see pretty consistent growth. Certainly be interesting to get April stats and see what the impact of Americans' actions have been, but it has been around a while. Adoption's been slow, but there has been adoption, and the growth has been pretty significant. And just I'll close on the end of the last year, we were at about 7% NDC transactions flowing through our system. Just within the first 2.5 months of this year, we jumped almost 3 percentage points. So pretty significant.
And Chuck, sorry for the friendly fire question here, but when the American volume starts coming through the GDS with NDC on the back end, is ARC going to be able to see that as NDC volume, or is that going to look like legacy GDS volume to you?
No, we're going to see it as NDC. Okay, so they're going to come to us as NDC transactions, but we're going to be able to integrate and have those transactions flow through our systems, just like the GDS transactions would. Agencies can do all the same things that they can to a GDS issued transaction, within our system. So it's from that perspective, from an ARC systems perspective, there's specifically to American, every airline has their own set of rules and manages things differently. But American's implementation is very, 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 very similar to what it would look like to be able to process and settle a GDS issue ticket.
And points to you, Corey. I love the setup of a question with "Sorry for the friendly fire." Always a good start. So if you guys see me looking off to this side, this is where I'm seeing the Q&A. And as I anticipated, we have a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to the audience questions. Let's start with Lauren Zajak's question. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Lauren. We've got, how do you see this playing out with crisis management assistance providers who are integrated with their client's TMC? Whoever wants to take it.
That's got to be Sue's, right?
I mean, I'm not really sure how we're talking about the question, to be totally honest. But I think if what we're saying is strictly NDC content that goes through the TMC, I don't see there being any difference. The TMC should be processing through the mid and back office through your duty of care provider. If what we're talking about is direct bookings, that is a problem if you don't have a relationship either with the airlines to enable the airlines to directly send your content or your itineraries to your duty of care provider, or a relationship with Traxo or some of the others that are newer entrants on the market.
Well, to give a little color, so Bruce McIndoe replied and he said, from talking with the top three, they're all trying to figure out what data will be missing and how they're going to get it. So just ticketed data does not provide the data they need, is what he's saying. And he follows up by saying the big issue for duty of care is there may be a way to get NDC once. However, for a duty of care solution, we need to know when it is booked, so we have a maximum time to actually manage the risk. Then beyond ticketed, we need to know when it is updated and especially canceled. So you guys have any thoughts around that as it relates to NDC?
I think my answer still stays the same, which is if it's being processed through your TMC, hopefully your TMC is getting that data and sending it through to your duty of care provider. If not, that's something you should put pressure on your TMC for. If you allow direct booking, like my company does, we give our employees the choice. Our connection for duty of care for direct bookings is through Traxo. And so when there's a hiccup, we know about it and we send it to our Traxo team to see if there was a hiccup on their side. If not, then we send it to our duty of care provider and say, fix this.
As a general comment, before the NDC trend, nobody knew that they were actually using EDIFACT connections between GDSs and airlines before, right? So just because we now know the name of the technology that airlines and GDSs are using to talk to each other doesn't mean that the data is going off into outer space someplace. It's simply a newer technology that carries different information. I saw a question in here about whether airlines using NDC via GDSs are going to allow GDS exchanges. The answer to that is absolutely yes. If you were to talk to Sabre and others today, they will swear that they can handle exchange scenarios with American's NDC connection today. And so just because the pipe's changing behind the scenes, you shouldn't assume that everything breaks and falls down. The same providers that are providing you all these services today have a long list of projects, and many of them were done by the time this implemented.
Interesting. So Paula Flowers asks, are we better off just waiting on NDC content so our travelers don't have to deal with the problems being worked out? Whoever wants to take it. I knew we were gonna have
Big question. Depends upon what situation you're in. I'll try to answer that question from the most generic situation you can be in the US, and that is you're a Concur booking tool user. You've got about 75% online booking tool penetration. You're using a TMC that uses Sabre. And so you find yourself in a situation where your main choice is in Concur. You have to decide whether you want to use Concur Select Access or Concur Triple Link to get access to American's NDC content, or whether you just kind of wait and see, or go one step further and just say, I'm so angry at American, I'm going to book away from them. So if you do nothing at all, then the outcome is you're missing American's lowest fares in every cabin. And there have been some numbers bandied about on the web this week that suggest that the value of that difference is in excess of $100 a ticket. So imagine that $100 a ticket being added to the cost of your program. By doing nothing, you're costing yourself $100 per American ticket, assuming you're still buying American tickets. If you've chosen to not buy American tickets anymore, then you're probably costing yourself more than $100 a ticket for the sake of retaliation. So I would say that the wait and see approach is probably the most expensive approach you can take at this point. As a Concur user, you're better off probably exploring the other options they make available to you with Select Access and or booking on airline.com using TripLink, because at least you get access to the lower fares. Yes, some of the processes will be different behind the scenes. Maybe those processes are even more costly. I don't know. Your TMC would know that better than me. But are they $100 a ticket more costly? I really doubt it.
So I'm going to go to, and by the way, audience, there's a little thumbs up. It's kind of like an upvote. So that's how I'm choosing which questions to ask with the time that we have. So I'm going to go with whatever the most popular questions are. Matt Orego asks, so if you expect NDC to drive bookings directly to airline.com, how do you manage travel policy? It's great that you capture via Traxo, but how do you know it was booked and authorized under policy? This might be a Sue's question, I'm thinking.
Yeah, you don't, is kind of the blunt answer. But I'm also okay with that. And you know, I have this kind of slide that I'm happy to share with Matt that says why I'm okay with that. But essentially, it's more often than not, when your people are booking direct, they're booking direct for a reason, right? And how many of us on the line who are travel managers have heard, well, I found it cheaper here. I don't know about anyone else, but for me, it was about a once a month occurrence, and this week it's about an every hour occurrence. So yeah, it's happening. And the truth of the matter is you are going to find it cheaper now outside of my TMC. And so I still would prefer they book it directly through the TMC, especially for those airlines that we don't have direct relationships with through Traxo. But if nothing else, I am covered for duty of care purposes. And what I always say is our expectation as an organization is that you do the right thing and you are prudent with ZS's money and your client's money. And if you are not, that is not a travel program issue or a travel policy issue. That's an HR issue. And so I'm not the one that has to have that tough conversation. The tough conversation goes to a different department.
That is a very good answer, Suze. Yeah, so it may not be a travel policy issue. It might be a culture issue. But very good point. So we've got another popular question.
Hey, Justin, just to that point, I'd also say that, there always has been, and there's going to continue to be leakage in programs. And the airlines recognize that. And a number of them are talking to companies like New Travel, who are engaged with them on how to bring things such as policy, if you will, to bookings that are done on their .com sites, right? So, there's always been that issue. I think, you're seeing more and more activity in that space now. And that's a place, you mentioned earlier that, we have an interest in New Travel, and you want to make sure that, some of those holes do get plugged.
And I would just add on to that. Sorry, Suze, go ahead.
I was going to say, we have also talked to New Travel and we love their product as well, and have already moved forward. So it is something every travel manager, in my opinion, should look at and consider implementing in their program to get visibility and to enable just more options for your people.
Yep.
It's almost as if there's a combination of technology providers that can ready companies for this.
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Interesting. So we've got another question here from Karen Bond. She says, how does this benefit a managed corporate travel program? I don't think it does. We're being shot in the foot to maintain a solid program. So how is this okay in the industry? I'm frustrated, but like Suzanne said, we can't stick our head in the sand. Anybody want to take that one?
Maybe,
hey,
maybe I'll give a very refreshing, candid answer from the perspective of somebody who used to run distribution strategy at an airline. Maybe the problem was that the distribution relationships and commercial relationships before actually weren't working for the airline. And maybe they just got sick of it. And so, yeah, sometimes when you get in situations where the playing field for the industry is skewed too far in one direction, you get a reaction in the other direction. And when you get a reaction in the other direction, that doesn't always feel nice, and it might not be net good for you personally. But this is a process of the industry kind of resetting commercial relationships, technical relationships. There will be winners and losers, and we will have a new normal coming out of this.
And Corey, one thing I would add to that is that the travel managers and the travel program, we're not the losers. I really don't believe that we are, because at the end of the day, if we're getting richer content and a more consumer-like experience into our program, what you're going to find is better adoption into your program. And so, yeah, it's going to take a while for the industry to get there. And yes, it is painful. I completely sympathize and empathize with you, Karen. But at the end of the day, this is going to be better for us. I think this is the right move. Wish, again, there was just maybe 1 or 2 more months into the deadline, but that is neither here nor there. I would find it very hard to believe that we are the losers.
I would say added on to that, right? So it's not only richer content, right, Suzanne, but it's more relevant content. And it's your ability to work with your preferred suppliers to customize bundles and packages that really, will provide the best experience possible for when your travelers are on the road. So there's a lot more flexibility in the new world. Like you said, it's going to take a little while to get there, but that's the direction things are headed.
And this question here, I think we've touched on this, but I don't know if we've answered it directly. So this person is asking, how is an NDC fare flagged or ID'd in the system? By fare class, some kind of designator? We've heard that you can't exchange an NDC fare with a non-NDC fare, and any changes or exchanges must be done directly with the airline. If a TMC calls the airline directly, there's a $50 fee with American?
That's a complex question. Let's try to unpack it. So with every airline, it's going to be different.
Yes.
Because for some airlines, it may be that every fare is an NDC fare, and it's never flagged because all that changed behind the scenes was the pipe used to be this pipe, and now it's this pipe. In the case of American specifically, what they've published is a naming convention for their fares. And so if you're looking at a particular character and a particular position in the fare, there is an indicator that it's a fare that can be ticketed via NDC versus a fare that can't be ticketed. But the point being, so long as they're open about what those indicators are and they're consistent about how they apply them, then all the third-party systems should be able to tell them apart from each other, that they might not all be 100% configured to look at that particular character and that particular fare basis code today. But with consistency over time, that kind of confusion can work itself out.
Yeah, I think that's another area, though. It's an opportunity again for GDSs as they're pulling this content in. You know, they're going to play a big role, we believe, in the future as well in terms of NDC aggregation, and being able to bring that content in and how they display it is going to be key. You know, Corey's absolutely right. You know, the business rules that an airline sets around a transaction, whether you can exchange an NDC transaction for an EDIFACT transaction or vice versa, that's decided by the airline. But what I can also tell you, though, is all the NDC messaging standards support automated exchanges. So, you know, agencies, TMCs do not need to pick up the phone and call, you know, American or any other airline for that matter to do that exchange. At the end of the day, depending upon how they're consuming or how they're getting access to their NDC content, whether or not their aggregator or the tools that they're using have done the programming to support the NDC messaging, that's a different issue. But, you know, American, for example, can support automated exchanges, and the messaging certainly does.
It's a very good question and a complicated one, like you said, Corey. So great answers, guys. Here's a question for Chuck. What is New Travel? Is it an ARC company?
We are majority owners of New Travel. They provide web services to airlines that allow them, as I said earlier, to kind of transform their .com sites to be more like a corporate booking tool, right? So they can bring in traveler profile. They provide a profile engine, so corporate travel buyers can upload their employee traveler profile information in there. They can upload policy information in there, payment information, and all of those different web services could be exposed to the airline. They can consume that, you know, to facilitate, like I said, you know, corporate travelers booking directly on the airline.coms.
So in short, theoretically, a company that hires New Travel can expect for their employees in a lot of cases to be able to go direct to the airline and still get their negotiated rates.
That is absolutely correct.
And it is very clear, I'll add, like it is extremely clear that you are getting your negotiated rate and that the connection is built and all of the benefits that are to your employees. So there's a great benefit in doing it.
If there could be a way to tackle the hotel industry with a New Travel concept, I'm just saying that would be just putting it out.
It may or may not be in the process of being explored. Just saying.
Oh, that's fantastic for the reporters on the line. Karen Bennett asks, what about airfare reshopping tools? Are they useless on NDC fares?
Pretty much, yes. The way NDC works in terms of shopping is you should assume that the shopping results that you get from the airline are valid in the moment only. In a lot of cases, not universally, but in a lot of cases, An airline will require that that offer be booked and ticketed in the moment. Now, that's not the case 100% of the time. I'm not saying that's how American is doing it 100% of the time this week, but the whole logic behind NDC is that the offers are real-time, personalized in some cases, and kind of use it or lose it. And in that environment, there's no such thing as reshopping. You have to decide whether you want to book and purchase that offer in the moment.
Excellent, excellent. This is a good question here. I keep hearing that NDC bookings made by TMCs are not serviceable by the TMC, like a passive segment. And I hear that NDC doesn't allow for changes or rebooks within the GDS, et cetera. So how limited will TMCs actually be in servicing and reporting NDC's bookings made through the TMC?
So I've been staying really close to the GDSs through this situation. The GDSs absolutely swear that their NDC connections with airlines accommodate exchanges within the GDS. So I would say that's categorically untrue within the GDSs. Now, there may be some scenarios that are more difficult to handle in the moment, but this was not implemented as just shop, book, pay. It was implemented as shop, book, pay, and service in the GDSs. Where it gets a little bit more fuzzy is in a scenario like I brought up Concur Select Access before. And with Concur Select Access, if you are accessing American's NDC content that way, then that booking is actually going outside the GDS through a company called Travel Fusion. Those bookings and tickets are issued separately from the GDS. There may be some cases where a passive segment is placed in the GDS that mirrors that record. And if the TMC wishes to service those transactions, they have to go into a separate system for that, either one provided by the airline or one provided by Travel Fusion. But in those cases as well, those bookings and tickets are indeed serviceable. Now, whether your TMC has actually set themselves up to be able to execute on that servicing capability may be a different question and may vary TMC by TMC.
Anyone else want to chime in on that? All right, so it seems like we're getting some similar, but yet asked in a different way. So apologies if I'm not catching duplicates here, but this question from Elsa says, how would a mid-office system track unused tickets or duty of care if it's booked via NDC and Sabre? Anyone want to take that one?
Suze, you have to be seeing this firsthand now. I have the same question. I would have asked Suze.
Yeah, I'm probably not the right person to ask, and Sarah is not on this panel. So I think, and I can verify this and send it to the group, but I think what we're finding is that it is correct that we are having trouble getting our unused ticket report if the tickets are not going through the GDS, if they're bypassing the GDS. And so therefore we get the unused ticket report from United directly, because that's who we have our NDC connection with right now. And they send us the unused ticket for essentially two sections, the NDC connection and for the United direct. So I believe it is correct that you do not see that as long as it doesn't go through the GDS. I believe if it does go through the GDS and it does go through your TMC and they're ingesting that data, then it should still be captured by the mid-office and your TMC should be able to report on it. But I would have to verify that answer. Don't take it as gospel. But does that sound right, Corey and Chuck?
Like I said, I would have asked you. I
Drug
trust
emoji.
anything that comes out of your mouth.
Okay, I'll try to find out and keep Elsa posted, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and for my Traxo team that's helping me out here, if you can go through and help me out with answered on some of these questions, I'm not getting there quick enough, but to kind of clear out some of the already answered questions. By the way, thank you, audience. This is great. This is the most questions we've ever had on one of our webinars. This is an interesting question, probably for the entire panel. Is this a real benefit for the traveler? Is it actually a real benefit for the traveler? It seems like the airline is taking what used to be included in the fare and now they're breaking everything out. where the traveler now needs to pay for each of these options.
Are y'all looking at me?
No,
I'm
That's the luxury
hesitating. Like,
of-
I feel like I want to answer this, but I'm going to leave it to the experts.
I have the luxury of not having to answer this as an airline anymore, because if I were still with an airline, I would be selling you all on how amazing it is that you can get personalized service and everybody can get exactly what they want and all that good stuff. Behind this, and that stuff is beneficial. I mean, if you were just to look at technology over technology, what's new in the new technology that a traveler might find interesting and useful, it's that there's more content, there's more choice, and more content, more choice doesn't destroy utility. It adds utility. Does it add as much utility as the airline gets out of an NDC strategy? No. And airlines get quite a lot out of NDC strategies. Normally they start with a cost savings initiative of some kind, because that's what airline CFOs want to see when they agree to invest in new technology. They want to feel confident that they're going to get cost savings. And then once the cost savings are realized, then it turns into more of a revenue upside business case. And that revenue upside can come in the form of bundles and ancillaries, but it can also come in the form of things like continuous pricing. I think it's very instructive to see that United is very open about the fact that they do continuous pricing, that they do it as much as they do, and they do it, and they're growing it as fast as they are. I can tell you, having spent a lot of time with Scott Kirby and Andrew Nacella before, they don't do anything a lot and quickly unless they've seen the data that suggests that it's a positive for them. So let's be real here. Most of the benefit in NDC is for the airline, and there are some benefits for travelers as well. But if I were in airline shoes today, I would not be embarrassed at all to come out and say, look, there's a lot of benefit in this for me, and that's why this is coming about. I'm not philanthropic, and I'm doing some things that are in my interest, and I think that others will get something out of this too.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a business. They're for profit, right? I mean, but to Susan's point, the travelers and the travel managers and the corporations are not the losers in this. You're just bringing richer content to enhance the program.
Well, and think about the negotiation power you get from it too, right? Hey, my travelers bought a ton of economy plus seating or main cabin extra seating, whatever each airline calls it, right? Now, all of a sudden you have that data, you can go and say, look, what can we do? How can we negotiate this into our agreements and maybe get a better price for it? I think there's a lot unwritten still about NDC and what the future is going to look like for negotiations with corporate travel managers. But I'm a firm believer that if you have the data, that's always a good thing. And quick side note, Elsa, I was correct. You do have to go directly to your airline rep. I just heard from Sarah, so she verified that.
And I would just add that we all have to reorient what our anchor is that we compare everything against in this industry. The industry is not going back to a bundled fare. We're not going back to Edifact pipes. We're all going to have to get used to the fact that airline, commercial models are what they are. The new technology is what it is, and we need to adapt at this point. It's
is that a surprise
time for
to
complaining
anyone?
about it is over. Now we need to make the right decisions.
At the end of the day, if I think about one of the most popular food chains in North America, it's Chipotle, right? And you get to go and you get to create your own design every time you go to Chipotle. It can be a bowl, it can be tacos, it can be a burrito. You can add whatever you want. I mean, I think we're a bit spoiled in the sense that.
What's interesting on that, Suze, is there are people out there that have been able to hack the Chipotle system and the value of this huge meal for like $2 or $3. Very interesting.
And I have no doubt that there is some road warrior out there that's going to hack the airline system to some degree.
Maybe you can get your seat as the beans in one category and the rice, and you can put together your own burrito with your travel. I don't know. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, and so I really do think that this is what our travelers want, and it's what I know it's what millennials want. I am one, and I am positive it's what Gen Z wants too. They want to be able to create their own every time they go to a website.
I think you got time for one more question. So panelists, sorry for the friendly fire. I'm going to ask if you're okay if we get these questions to you, after the fact, maybe getting some responses so that these attendees can see. Apologies to the audience. We were not able to get to all the questions today. Here's an interesting question about if booking NDC through your TMC, you have all these ancillaries, 48 ancillaries are offered. Can the TMC limit to in-policy options through NDC? Or to clarify, can a TMC block the $50 bottle of wine during the flight if such a purchase is against the policy?
I think so.
Yeah, it may or may not be the TMC doing it. I mean, it's the systems with the policy engine that sit in between the TMC and you. Yes, in general, the systems that I've seen have policy engines in them that allow you to filter different types of products and scenarios.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. Any closing remarks or thoughts? We've got a ton of interest on this topic and a ton of questions coming through. By the way, audience, just a reminder again, we are recording this. We're going to be showing this through the Traxo Resource Center, also on our YouTube channel if you want to view the recording after. And for those that have submitted questions with their name, we can actually reply after the fact. I will make sure to get those questions to the panelists, for their answers. Any other closing thoughts, comments from the panel? I'll leave it open.
I'll say this, right? NDC is not going to go away. So a wise man once said, you got to start somewhere. And as Sue said, pick a friendly supplier, pick an airline that you're friendly with, and work with your TMC to take that first step.
Yep. Corey, any thoughts from you?
That's a good one to end on.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to thank the audience for attending today. And so as we close, I'd like to personally thank all of those who attending today's webinar. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I got to get to my notes. Yeah, so as we close, I'd like to personally thank all of those attending today's webinar, and especially those that contributed with thoughtful questions. Now, as many of you know, Traxo has been running its office hours webinar series for over 2 years, and our goal has been to bring relevant content to our industry, regardless of Traxo's direct involvement. But we thought it especially appropriate to call out our sincere desire to be of help in this specific topic. Regardless of your supplier, direct bookings to take place for most corporations, regardless of your stance on the advancement of NDC, I believe everyone can agree there is a high probability for supplier direct bookings to take place for most corporations. And that's where Traxo can be of help. Traxo has the ability to capture in real time bookings, cancellations, and changes corporate travelers make regardless of the source. So this means we can provide full visibility into all of your travel data. And we have the ability to instantly share that data with your TMC, duty of care, and other travel suppliers. We can do this without installing software and with no required onboarding, training, or opt-in for the travelers themselves. So if you're curious to learn more about how Traxo can help to support your organization through NDC changes and beyond, we would love to hear from you. Please visit the link here, and we'll be happy to set a time to connect. Thank you again for coming today, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on our next Office Hours webinars. Goodbye, everybody.